Thanks very much for joining us. We are the Beer Farmers. We're here to talk about organisations that claim they take your security seriously, when in fact they do quite the opposite. And we're also here to talk about some examples of good practice that are out there. Well, we've got a couple of friends, so they need no introduction themselves, but they're going to join us in a little while around the talk. So we'll kick off. Is anybody in the room under the age of 18? Okay.
There's always one.
Mental age.
So we carry a parental advisory because we do, some of it, one of us does tend to say...
I say cunt a lot, alright? That's just what I say, okay?
Okay. So that's
no,
why...
that's what we're done with.
That's why we carry the parental advisory. So there might be a bit of swearing, but we'll make every effort to keep it in the context of the talk, okay? If any of you start swearing, then that's fine, because the parental advisory is out there. So thank you very much, Meadow, for the introduction. You look fantastic. Would we like to introduce ourselves? We'll start with Chrissy.
Hello, I'm Chrissy Morgan.
I'm Mike. John?
I'm John Obdenakker. Difficult name here in England, but I'm the Belgian guy.
I'm Fat Hobbit. I have one of these.
Please follow.
I'm Sean.
I've got mine. I'm Andy. I hack shit and I work for a company.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. So you can see our Twitter handles all up there. The Beer Farmers do have their own Twitter account. You probably see us. We do propaganda shit out from there from time to time.
We had an APT bot for a while.
We had an APT bot for a while, which really did upset and scare a few people. It wasn't the intention. It was hashtag just for fun. And we have a website which we don't keep up to date whatsoever. So
we have a website?
We do. We have a website.
It's on WordPress.
When it comes to redundant websites, it's on Ghost.
I heard it's unhackable.
We have a slide around that topic in a little while.
And the website's down.
Beerfarmers.org. So I'll go through this, I think. So who are we in the real world? So Chrissy does physical security. I called it close protection, but not everybody necessarily know what that means. But physical security and friendly hacking, you do a lot of that stuff. I work for an ISP in the north of England called Zen Internet. So we are a medium-sized organisation, and I run the security analysis team. So I'm a defender. I send a lot of emails. We'll get onto that in a second. John's a security champion for his organisation back in Belgium. Okay, so he spreads a good word about everything that we do. Ian is a defender, a manager, and an emailer.
I write a lot of emails.
Talk about the emails a bit, yeah?
Yeah.
And he provides great intel. So if you know Ian and know his background, it's Canadian intelligence, military intelligence.
Yep.
So he's got, out of a lot of us, apart from my rock and roll stories, you've got the best stories, really. Sean, you're a security champion in your own organisation, and Andy is a friendly hacker.
I hack shit and write reports. Basically what I do.
Okay. Fitting that a certain organisation has a stand outside the door.
Awkward.
And we tried to come in quietly, but clearly that's not going to happen. It didn't happen. But if you've seen any of our talks earlier in the year, throughout the first 6 months of the year, we do tend to discuss Facebook quite a lot. And we don't do it just because we want to pick on Facebook. We do it because they're constantly in the news for egregious practice. Okay, so you don't really need to spend too far away from social media or all the news platforms to find that Facebook have lost data. Facebook have made a really carnal decision at the very top of the organisation around privacy, and that goes on all the time. And the quote there that I took from an email that Mark Zuckerberg sent to senior executives way back was that privacy is a social norm of the past. And I think that seems to be. We see evidence of that, evidence in support of that. And as a consequence, the current perception is that Facebook is evil core. Their lawyer came out last week and said that nobody using social media should have any expectation of privacy. Because if they read the terms and conditions, because we all do, they'll see that actually they seek our permission to do whatever they want with our personal data. That may well be right when it's written down, but A, no one ever reads the T's and C's. We know about Apple's T's and C's.
We all read the T's and C's.
I don't read the T's and C's on a back of a packet of
I read
paracetamol.
Pornhubs. They know stuff.
But then there's a moral argument about it, and their lawyer said that we can all go hang. That comes a little bit after Mark Zuckerberg said the opposite, really. He said that we should be taking privacy and security more seriously. So the higher echelons of that company are diametrically opposed with each other philosophically, and I think that's not great and it's not healthy. So when we talk about Facebook, we talk about the organisation at large and its senior executives and some of its philosophical directions and decision-making. What we're not talking about is the security engineering and the good people that work for the organisation, of which there are many. So
Or the guys at that table over there.
Those guys out there.
Yeah, we're not talking.
They're great guys. Yeah.
So a quick show of hands, and we like to do this. Who's got a Facebook account? You don't have to tell us who it is, what it is. Awesome, so that's quite a few. Me, I've got one. I use it. Who deleted their Facebook account in light of things that have gone on? Okay, so not too many. I don't know how many 100 people are in the room, but that's quite a low number. Okay. 10 said yes. Who's thinking about getting rid of their Facebook account in the context of hashtag delete Facebook? So again, not too many. And I see arguments about it. We get involved in discussions about this, and I think really it's about understanding your own threat profile at the end of the day. And I use my Facebook to chat with mates and share pictures and cat memes and stuff like that. But I do that on Twitter too. Yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that. So understand your threat model, but also understand that to a large extent, Facebook does not take your security seriously as an organisation. Any of you guys want to comment?
Well, it's just I have a super depressing life, so I don't exactly want to have it on Facebook.
Not to mention your brushes with law and all that.
Yeah, that's true. No, I think you came onto the point, and I think, Sean said it best. What's your quote about Facebook? That if it's free,
that's
or the
my
product,
quote. Sorry,
what, is that your quote?
Yeah,
I get the two confused. They look like brothers, and I'm shit with names.
Well,
say the
quote.
quote.
The quote is essentially. That's my cue.
Yeah.
The quote is essentially if the platform is free, you're the product. It's the same for anything. It's the same for Twitter. It's the same for LinkedIn. It's the same for social media. It's the same for Pornhub. It's the same for everything. You are the product, and our corporation's success.
Yeah, agreed.
Is that shut the fuck up, Andy? I'm speaking, or is that just a call?
All right. So it turns out that actually privacy is a pain in Mark Zuckerberg's wallet, because I don't know if you read it in the news recently. Facebook have put aside or made it a profit adjustment of between $3 and $5 billion US to pay a Federal Trade Commission fine against and levy of all of their bad practice around privacy. So that's kind of them realizing that financially it will harm them ultimately. And you think, well, 3 to 5 billion in the context of the value of Facebook might not be much money. But in the old scheme of things, fines we were seeing around this were like ICO level fines of £400,000 to £500,000. So we are starting to see some pretty serious financial penalties hitting these organisations. Sean?
Also, shareholders and investors and that do not like seeing fines issued against companies because it obviously sheds bad light on them. So again, that's something that should hopefully, well, I'm not an advocate of trying to bury businesses, but provide incentive to do the right thing and deal with morals and that properly and ethically.
Yeah, and also with Facebook and Google and some of these big companies, they make this kind of money within minutes or hours. So you're fining them, and they don't really care. It's kind of like more of a outlook of how they look. But what I think what we could do is perhaps restrict them. So where they've got their ads in a certain country, stop them from having their ad revenue coming in, or stop them from being, I guess, within Europe if we've got the GDPR to fall back on.
So yeah, okay. We're about to finish hammering Facebook. But again, it goes back to the point I made earlier. Excuse me, about their lawyer. Can't quite agree with them as an organisation. He's defending the fact that they should really be perfectly at liberty to do what they're doing.
Well, I think, too, one of the aspects of this is it's running straight into the entire concept of the GDPR. So at some point, there's going to be showdown, right? There's going to be a whole bunch of supervisory authorities on one side, and there's going to be a Facebook lawyer on the other side. And it's going to come to a head. And it's not just Facebook. The most startling thing I heard about the other day was that Google has written an email parser for anyone that's on the Gmail platform, all right? And what this email parser does is it looks for evidence of something that you've bought, like a receipt, and it stores that information away. And this wasn't disclosed to anybody using the Gmail platform that was going on. And so we're starting to see more and more of these ways that your personal private information, the things that you buy, are scrutinized by these companies, and then they profit off of that information that you never gave a right to them to sell to a third party or to use, to win an election or any of those things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so we said we'd stop panning Facebook, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to go and pan someone else. So hands in the air or shout out, who's this fella? Jack Dorsey, right? So he came out with a wonderfully philosophical statement years ago about, I just want to build stuff that really simplifies our base human interaction. Sounds like bollocks to me, to be honest. But I think that was him saying that, we want to get more people connected. And that really was the fundamental basis of what started Facebook, that and a bit of stalking. But it makes me wonder around, where did that message or that belief get lost? Well, it got lost in profitability and shareholder values and all that kind of stuff. But again, we talk about masses of data being lost. They lost at Twitter 330 million records in 2018, personal data. And I wonder, and I say this in a couple of our talks, whether we become, over time, a little bit desensitized if the numbers aren't in the at least hundreds of millions and billions and squillions and gazillions. That seems to only make the news these days. But I used to work in local authority for a large council in the north of England. And we had a root and branch investigation if a single child record was lost, or a USB stick with a couple of kids' records was lost or left in a taxi. And that would often result in serious disciplinary action. And that was before anybody really understood about deep data protection implications and stuff like that. So I care about one record if that can cause harm or a disadvantage to an individual. I think Troy might touch on some of this in a little while. So Ian's got a little story to tell, and I'm just going to push the button.
Yeah. So First America. Really interesting scenario there. And actually, I'm going to get one of my other beer farmers to jump into that. Huge company, huge amounts of data, all of it basically publicly available. What was the vulnerability? I'm not super technical anymore. I used to know a lot about Windows 2003 server. But what is it where there's the IDOR was the attack vector. And essentially, this allowed you to incrementally index and see all of those records to the tune of, what was it, 85 million?
885 million.
885
Close.
million records. All of the information you would need to do email phishing, identity impersonation, mortgage transfers, any of those type of things, or even extract money using those nefarious tactics of the immigration police are coming for you and you need to go and buy a whole bunch of Apple pay cards in order to not get arrested immediately. So this is fuel to the fire, and really detailed information, histories of properties that you've owned and sold, is a massive haul. And the point that I'm trying to make about this is that the issue did not lie here, I think, with the intentions of the organization. This happened as a result of a pressured IT environment. You guys might all be able to kind of agree with this. A high pressure IT environment where the business said, we're going to the cloud, make it work. And the IT guys started disabling security until it worked so that they could say project delivered on time and on budget. Let's go to the next thing. So the question really becomes is if that's what IT did to deliver this project, the security team, there's some negligence there. Where was the pen test? Where was the audit even? So this is where we're going with this in terms of this is a business failure and not an IT or IT security failure.
Yeah, the thing with that is that we see that often. If you can count, you can hack, literally. And you have this amount of data. And this is, like Troy is giving the workshops. Scott is doing them as well now. This is basic security knowledge. First of all, you need to have skilled people, so train them. And the second thing, there was a very good remark you made, that you should have found that even before a pen test. This is security testing. This should be part of your life cycle, not something that comes out of a pen test. Pen test is for the special cases, the more difficult ones, but not for, just incrementing a number. That's insanity. And you should never, as a security team, you should never agree with that. This is basic security.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'm not going to read the top part out. You can read that yourselves. But what it roughly translates to in our parlance is we take your security seriously, but evidently not. So, if somebody hand him a mic, I'd like to welcome Mr. Troy Hunt to the stage. I couldn't do that.
Is that it?
I couldn't do that. Not a chance. So, Troy, we know a bit about breaches, but I think it's fair to say that you're recognised as somebody that knows a hell of a lot more than we do. So what we'd like to get is a little bit of your insight, a bit of your current understanding, and a bit of your current thoughts on the subject and where you think it's heading.
We're all screwed, basically. Hey, can I give everyone stickers while I'm here?
Of course.
Yeah, and plus I get to throw stuff at the audience, and it's all kind of fun. Is this like
I'm not
UK
allowed
health
to
and
throw
safety?
things.
This guy's putting his hand up, just pass them around. Over there.
Yeah, they're not all for you.
There. Work it out. One more in the middle there, back there. All right. So look at that right in your lap.
That's an icon.
So where were we? We're all screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to look at that, you can look at that.
What am I up to? 7.7 billion, was it?
Well, I asked you, we had a chat about this a couple of months ago. We had something like there are 3 records per human live on the Earth that had been in a breach that we knew about. But we chatted about it, and you said, "Man, you're far too low with your number." You reckoned it was probably 10 per living person on the planet, and some.
So I guess the raw numbers in Have I Been Pwned is about 7.7 billion records. So just put it in context, there's obviously not that many people. There are 16 records that's me, because I'm in Dropbox and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So, that's sort of part of the problem. Like, one person ends up propagating their data multiple times over. And then in terms of unique email addresses, I think it's about 4 billion or something. And that's kind of weird too, because in my mind, I don't know are there 4 billion people with email addresses? How many people on the internet? Like 2 or 3 or something like that?
Yeah.
Some number of billions. But then, you end up with multiple email addresses. So the reason I started Have I Been Pwned is my work email address and my personal email address were both in the Adobe data breach. So you end up with multiple email addresses, multiple instances. And then we see a lot of data breaches as well that just have a lot of crap in them, like a lot of fabricated addresses. Particularly some of the data aggregators. Like I loaded, I think it was something like, let's say it was Apollo.io. One of these aggregators that just takes a whole bunch of your data from different places. Places like, when you sign up to that survey to win the cruise, and then you wonder why you didn't win the cruise, but you read the terms and conditions beforehand. It was like, we may take your data and sell it to people. None of you read that, did you?
Wait,
right.
there's no cruise?
Well, you're still here. But this is the thing, they take your data and then they aggregate it and they sell it. And one of the interesting things from some of those data breaches is there's people on Have I Been Pwned who work in organisations that get domain search results. So they'll work for Acme Corps, and I'll load something like Apollo, and they get this email which is like, here's all the email addresses that were in Acme Corps on your domain. And they're like, but I don't have sales at and marketing at. And a lot of these organisations just fabricate these addresses. So of that sort of 4 billion unique email addresses, there's also a whole bunch of junk in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a really good graphic, and I kind of know this exists because you used it in your Varonis GDPR briefing that you gave. So personally, I find this really impactful at work or when I'm doing talks internally, because everybody in my organisation has probably been in at least one of these things, in one of these blobs. There we see Twitter, I mentioned earlier, with their 330 million. Marriott Hotels, Ian. You're in there, right?
Several times.
Probably. But it's an impactful diagram. It's
using them.
Yeah, it's a really useful tool to highlight the problem. And I think, as you said, Troy, is it getting any better? No, it's not. In fact, it's getting much worse, right?
So I got to correct you on something you said before. Twitter didn't lose their data. They made a lot of backups of it. So they're never going to lose it now. Like, if they lose it, give me a call. I'll restore it for them. If anyone wants to see this is from a site called Information is Beautiful. So if you Google Information is Beautiful data breaches, and it's kind of cool, like the bubbles animate and stuff like that. I was doing some media stuff this morning at the other conference, and they were like, a data breach is getting worse. It's like, yeah, because there's lots of really good reasons why they're getting worse. So number one, there's like more data than ever before. Like we've all seen stats about how much information humans create like every day. Well, we're just creating a lot more of it. The cloud, two hands, the cloud has kind of made the whole thing a lot worse as well, insofar as it's so easy now for anyone just to stand up anything publicly facing. So there's so many data breaches we're seeing now, which is like MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Amazon S3, publicly facing without authentication because, hey, it's easy, right?
And logging turned off, so you don't even know who might have got it.
Yeah, well, that's the other painful thing. Like most of the time they only know when it's like I tweet and I go, hey, does anyone have a security contact? And everyone's like, oh, shit, this isn't going to be good. And that's what it tends to be.
Very true.
And then there's IoT as well, right? So we're seeing all these data breaches in IoT. So I wrote one, a few weeks ago with Ken Munro as well about watches. And that was IDOR too. So watches where you could track your children, because that sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Watches with GPSs to track your children, and you can make calls to the API and just increment the number and pull back another child or reposition a child or set yourself as the parent of the child so that you can then call the child. And the phone has got like zero interaction, the watch. And has anyone got one of these? Have you got like a kid's tracking watch? See, no one want to admit it now because what to say. But I always wonder, like, what's the point of getting the watch for the child? Because if you're going to kidnap the child, wouldn't you just take the watch off them?
Yep.
And I appreciate this sounds like I've thought about it way too much. This is just the nature of it. And then you could do stuff like, if you're the parent, you can call them and it will automatically answer, because what if someone's kidnapped the child and they've tied them up and they've put them in the back of a van and they can't reach it to answer? Like, how fucked up is this? We have to get to this point.
There's far too much.
I have. Okay. All right, everyone just forget about this. All right, so the kids' watches, the cloud pets. Anyone got a cloud pet? No? Good. So cloud pets are connected teddy bears. And I know what could go wrong. So they exposed all of their MongoDB data publicly facing without a password. And then they had all the kids' voice recordings in a publicly facing Amazon S3 bucket with obfuscated names, but all the metadata to the file locations within the Mongo. And it's all publicly facing. And we didn't have recordings of children before in that fashion. Like I remember when I was a kid, if my parents wanted to record me, they had to get out the tape player thing and the microphone and all that. And now it's like a kid's in their bed just talking to their teddy bear and it's on the internet. So like all of these are just compounding the prevalence of which data is collected and then making it easier to expose, and we're getting it from more places.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we talked earlier about the consequences of these data breaches and hacks that are going on. Equifax are now, the chickens are coming home to roost with Equifax, and they've had a lot of value wiped off their organisation. Ian, do you want to say a quick word about that?
This one was really interesting. So we saw 2 congressional reports, and as well as a report in the UK on Equifax. We saw the CEO of Equifax hauled in front of Congress, which doesn't really look to be very fun at all. And then the most interesting thing happened. Suddenly, the bond rating company went after them and lowered their credit score. And this was really interesting because it's the first time it's happened. It's the first time a bond rating company has lowered the credit score as a result of their spend to clean up their horrific breach. Because I think they're now closing in on or have exceeded $1 billion.
$1.4 billion.
$1.4 billion in costs associated with this breach. So finally, the real financial realities of data breach were felt at now being charged as a higher risk client to borrow even more money to fix your shoddy security.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's very interesting is when you're a giant company, you try to sell your corporate debt to other people, and the amount of money and interest that's paid is based on your credit rating, and now they're risky. So it's even more expensive for them to sell their corporate debt. This will put a really interesting spin on the cost of data breach if now we see the credit markets reacting negatively, which will truly impact the share value, as you can see, of the company right there. So really interesting to suddenly see the bond market wake up and go, oh, you know what? Shoddy cybersecurity, thou shalt now be punished.
Yeah, agreed. And the last point is the first point you made, that Moody's has downgraded them from stable to negative. Now, that's the kind of behaviour you see happen to countries. Okay, so that's pretty bad shit. Okay. Yep.
I just want to add one thing. So when you take into account that, as well as the cost that it's costed them, this all resulted from a simple fix, was just updating the Apache struts. So if you look at it from that point of view, it wasn't like something major that would take months and months to fix. This was something really trivial in a sense, not always that trivial, but in terms of spend to fix it, you're not talking millions.
Not even.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. So, we'd like to pass the mic to Mr. Scott Helm and welcome him to the stage. Thank you, Troy. We'll be seeing you again in a few minutes. All right, thank you, Scott. Now, what we'd like to do here is allow Scott to share some of his insights around the encrypted web and the ongoing battle that is encrypting the web. So he's got some fantastic insights I'm sure he'd like to share with us, and Sean's got some interesting opinions he'd like to share back. But we'll make it clear we're all on the same side. So, Scott.
Yeah, so the encrypted web thing for me, I think, like, the number one point always comes back to me. If we were to redesign the web today, and let's say, like, we could go back to square one and start this again from the beginning, would we just have, like, default encryption? Would that be the stance? Would we be like, oh, hey, we could have the option of HTTP and HTTPS? And I honestly think that if we were to rebuild it now and reset to zero, we'd just start with an encrypted network, because that would be, like, the smart choice. So I think, what we're doing right now is essentially fixing that kind of design flaw in the beginning, that the network wasn't secure. And that was largely based around the trust we had. So who can go back and think of the web, like, way back in the early days, like into the 90s? I'm going to test the room now. 80s? Okay, that's all right. So, it was a small place, right? Like, things were very different back then. It was a very trusted environment. We had, the internet phone book where you could go look up an IP address and see people's, name and actual physical address and who they were. And now I have toasters and scales in my house with internet connections. And we've just gone, this full revolution away from what the environment originally was. So for me, this is not, we're deploying HTTPS to protect people, which it does, but we're deploying it to fix the original issue that we didn't have encryption in the first place. There's no scenario that I can think of where deploying encryption makes something worse, nor is there a scenario that I can think of where it won't protect you against at least something. So we continue to remove barriers. We've got things like Let's Encrypt with free SSL. You can get certificates for no financial cost now, just the minimal technical cost. The performance thing has just been completely washed away. Maybe late 90s, early noughties, we could make the performance argument. But nowadays the cost is essentially zero. And actually most of the time we can go faster on HTTPS than HTTP for web apps. So for me nowadays, this is just kind of a given. We need to reset the clock back to zero and say, right, we just need to go encrypt the whole network. And then we can stop worrying about all of these just wide variety of attacks that we could get rid of.
Yeah, agreed. But while we're trying to do that, right, we have this kind of argument. Okay? And Sean, you've got a view on this, and John?
So what is this about? Yeah, this was about Trustify. And why did they made it to the slides? Just because they they quote tweeted a tweet I did with arguments, and the tweet I did was about some company who had their Let's Encrypt certificate expired. And I quote tweet and I say, okay, automate all the things, make sure that this doesn't happen. There's automation, so this doesn't have to happen. And then Trustify
holy hell started.
Came up and they say,
infographic.
They say something about the false economy of free certificates, and also that the BA, the British Airways hack, was due to certificates. We all know that British Airways hack was due to third-party compromise. And Sean, literally, I tweeted it out, I mentioned some people, and Sean ripped all their arguments. Yeah, they tear them apart. So over to Sean.
Yeah, so one thing I think is really important when you're trying to get security in that out is give the right information. Try to be as honest as possible. If you're trying to market something, don't put out false information. And that's kind of what they were doing there. There was a lot of the things that we were saying were completely inaccurate. I mean, the headline there is a good example with BA. It was a JavaScript. Absolutely nothing to do with the certificate. And that thing just really riles me up. I mean, this comes back to my point earlier where we need to do things morally and ethically. Sell your business on the things that it can do rather than false information.
Yeah, completely agree.
If I may chime in, the thing is, in my opinion at least, if you call out companies for this kind of behavior, I think that's a good thing. Why? Because other people who maybe don't understand all technical details, they will just believe them. One other important thing I often see is that support employees from companies get called out and even get abused online, and that's not cool. Honestly, that's not cool. You can be not okay with something a company does, but always think about the person who's just doing the Twitter or the other support, and that's important to me.
Don't be a dick, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just reaffirm that point? So I got quite a bad reputation online for being like anti-CA, anti-certificate authority, because I'm constantly pulling things like this apart, and it's not. I'm not like anti-CA or like raging against the machine or whatever people say. It's what you kind of picked up on there. Is that they're spreading this information. Someone will read that and believe it essentially because it's like, well, why would this organization lie in this infographic? And
especially if it comes from a thought leader.
So yeah, it's like this. That's the reason for me. Like, this is why I spend so much time on this, especially in the CA ecosystem, pulling these things apart and just breaking it down to technical points. Not because I don't like them. I mean, I don't like them because of what they've done, but not because I have some inbuilt dislike. So, it is about correcting these facts that are out there.
Yeah. Okay, did somebody mention unhackable earlier? So, yeah, and it speaks to the point about making bold and insubstantiated claims about the security posture of your product. Bit5, Pandora, et al. Are all products that were destroyed rather publicly by pen test partners, represented here by Andy over there. So, do you want to say a quick few words about this?
Yeah, you should say. I've got a mic, so good. Don't claim shit's unhackable, basically. That's the TLDR. But essentially, Bit5 was endorsed by this cunt up here. It was said to be a super secure, unhackable Bitcoin wallet, and within about, well, Dave will agree with me, within about a day it was torn apart by Tierney, a day and a half. So Andrew Tierney, Cyber Gibbons on the Twitter sphere, took it apart and basically went through all the claims that Bit5 had said, like, oh, it's got a limited viewing angle. He went, oh, actually, I can see it side on, so that's bullshit. It's a super secure device. Actually, they took it apart. It was using MediaTek, which is like a really cheap Android device. So that was bullshit. They said it wasn't a phone, it had SIM card slots in it. Totally not a telephone. And a load of other shit. And then on to Pandora. Some of you might have seen I was on the BBC driving my bright blue car. If you're not, go fucking Google it, it's great. For one day, the BBC took us to an airfield and we got to hack shit, basically. And essentially Pandora were claiming that they had an unhackable car alarm because who wants to connect their car to the internet and make sure that it's not going to be hacked.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to speed things up just a little bit. Okay. So Bit5 did repent a bit, and we like that.
That tweet is like the solution to everything.
The tweet was kind of like, yeah, we fucked up, right? Don't use unhackable.
Hack again, though. Have you seen them?
And then last week, this came back with the same sort of claims. They've spent a lot of time. They're now on their 37th CEO, somebody, and they're making the same bold statements again. Just don't do it. So the good news is that there are people out there doing good things, and there are organisations that actually give a shit, and they do want to keep our privacy and our data security on the web. So passwords are a problem, and they remain a problem, and they will remain a problem for a long time. And we see lots of novel alternatives to passwords. But from a usability point of view, and I'm thinking about my mum, who's 80, she's not going to get beyond a username and password. And for many people in a similar sort of context, that will remain the case. So we have to espouse responsible password management, I think, first and foremost. We do have to have the MFA discussion, and we do have to press organisations that can support MFA to roll it out as an optional tool. For users that are aware and familiar and savvy enough to implement MFA for themselves, and we should encourage those users to implement MFA. Okay, so that's my take on it. Any other comments, chaps?
So it doesn't help when the bigger firms actually don't make our job easier. So they put password length restrictions, for example, Microsoft. And even some of the big ones, like Microsoft, may even produce patterns when they're actually generating a password for you, which is something not very good. And when it comes to the two-factor authentication as well, they're actually, when it comes to shared email boxes, if you've got shared email boxes in your organization, make sure that you can't log into Office 365, because guess what? You need two-factor authentication on those also sometimes. And the big organizations just really aren't helping, are they?
Yeah. I mean, they hide behind the fact that, well, we've got sprawling software architecture and implementations are huge, and it makes it really difficult. But what makes life really difficult for that organization is when their data's looted to the tune of millions and millions of accounts when it could have been prevented.
So just to add one more thing on passwords and MFA, using things like Password Manager, and something I'd really love to see more often is WebAuth or WebNorth, UTF tokens, FIDO, because not only do they help prevent against the password, weak passwords and that kind of thing, but they're also going to help against things like phishing. Google, they supplied all their employees with UTF tokens, and to date, I think this is still true, not one of their employees have suffered a successful phishing attempt.
So these are some of the things that organisations that do care are doing. So they're running things like responsible disclosure policies. Show of hands, who's familiar with the security Dot Txt standard? Okay, it's quite a few people. So it's the deployment of a simple text file onto your web application that points somebody that finds a bug to how to tell you about it in a responsible fashion. It's a really simple thing to do. You don't have to write a long policy around responsible disclosure. You just have to put something out there that guides somebody to tell you about it. And if they do tell you about it, then it's kind of incumbent on you to fix it. If they cared enough to tell you and not to hack you, then I think you need to care enough to turn that bug around. Severity, based on severity. Crap header notwithstanding. Leave me alone. Okay. But yeah, be clear and make it really easy for people to get in touch with you. So we've got a slide dedicated to our newest beer farmer, Miss Chrissy Morgan, and that's around looking after researchers.
Yeah. So I recently did a talk around this, so it's just a very high level couple of the points. So there are some international standards that are there to actually help researchers, but these international standards that are there, like the ISOs, they're very much aimed at the companies that they're written for. They leave a lot of room for what is a researcher supposed to do when they come to a company and things don't go right. One of the more reports rather than a standard that I found was CERT in America. Now those guys are really good. If you read their report that they've done around responsible disclosure, coordinated disclosure, you'll find that they've actually written it for the researchers because we need support and advice and help being backed up. There's some changes in the law. I know some of the NCC guys were trying to get a lot of people talking about the CMA Act and seeing if that can be changed at all. When I've spoken to some other researchers, they've said that we have to be quite careful because when they change the law, they don't always change it in the best for our own benefit always. And appreciate if someone's knocking on your door and telling you you've got a problem, let them in and speak to them. It's far too often I've got researchers coming to me now and telling me basically these guys are being pricks to me or they're just ghosting me, and it's not really fair, is it?
I just want to add something because I've had this time and time again where you report something, as Chrissy said, you either get radio silence or no response. A response, but then it goes silent still. And companies need to realize that researchers coming to them with these findings is not a criticism of that company. Everyone has flaws. Take it on as a good thing. You've not ended up in the media for the wrong reasons. Fix it. Work with the researcher. Give them a thank you. It doesn't always have to be money. A simple thank you goes a long way. And doing that will help strengthen your relationship with that community and make things better for your company.
One last thing on that as well. We've actually seen companies recently that had breaches and deal with the disclosure and then the fix so well that they actually come out looking good. And like the one example that always sticks in my mind was Cloudflare with Cloudbleed. And, that for a CDN company, if you aren't familiar, you can read the details, but that could have been like a devastating issue, but they just dealt with it so well and transparently and quickly. You're like, actually, you know what? I don't mind using this company because I know when things eventually do go wrong, they're going to nail the fix. Yeah. So, I think this is really important.
Sorry, Sean.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I've done this test on a few other venues. Right. Who's heard of the Equifax breach? Majority of the room. Who's heard of the Discuss breach? Only a handful.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing about this, because the saddest thing in the world happened as a result of irresponsible disclosure. So I don't know if you followed on Twitter the Sandbox Escaper saga of a very, I would say, angry, possibly mentally ill person who dropped a series of 0 days that were easily weaponized into very serious malware. At the same time calling out the FBI and the American government. I feel like that was a giant cry for help, and it was a very sad moment in irresponsible disclosure, because doing that in that fashion, to me, is essentially like trying to get the U.S. military to carry out your suicidal wishes. We have a precedent for this. A different dude by the name of Trick, who is with Team Poison and started a little something they called the Cyber Caliphate, who took a selfie in front of a recognizable landmark and was vaporized by a Predator drone. So even though the paper said this is like the first time somebody blah, blah, no. If you do the history and you understand what is at stake, irresponsible disclosure can lead to physical violence at security conventions. We saw that one. And possibly your untimely demise.
Just to be clear, the physical act at that conference, didn't the person go through responsible disclosure?
Yeah, but then they were irresponsibly hit in the face, I believe is how it works.
All right.
They tried.
We got 15 minutes left.
Okay.
So, test and fix your stuff. All right. So do pen testing. Test your processes. Test your people. Don't be afraid to get external auditing done. Yeah, don't be afraid to get an authority in to come and talk to you about what you need to do to be a better organisation. Equip your people with the tools and the knowledge and the expertise to carry out repairs and do the right things, design and build stuff securely to begin with. So these guys do the hack yourself first stuff, which is something that Troy conceived many years ago. That got me into application security in the first place, and I've been quite public about that. You're running courses, right?
Yep.
This year?
Got the tour on.
Okay, so Glasgow, Manchester and London. So Scott, if you want to know more about that. Very important. You can't blame people if they don't know at the end of the day. That applies to whether you're a software developer, a network app designer, a network engineer, or an operator on a Twitter account. Okay? Let's just be clear about that. Have I been pwned? Everyone in the room has probably been pwned. How many in the room, which again, show of hands, has proved it by using this application? Oh, wow. Yeah. Self-validating that, I think. It's fair enough. It's a tool. There are stickers around. Troy managed to throw them out at people better than we threw our swag out at Leeds, which somebody lost an eye and a guy lost an arm. Just kidding. And talk. You're here because you want to get involved in the community. You want to talk to people that are fighting the same battles you're fighting, have the same anxieties, the same aspirations that you have. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to learn new stuff or you want to interact with people that are on the same side as you. So that's really important. Sharing information. A breach isn't an if, it's a when. Some of you will work for organisations that have already been breached, but you don't yet know about it. Okay. So don't live under the...
Troy might, though.
Don't live under the misapprehension that it'll never happen to us, because it will. And when it does, it'll feel a bit like that, okay, to your organisation. But it's important that you don't panic. It's important that you've prepared. So it'll feel like that in everyone's head, and we do all fuck up, right, regularly. But there is a little toolkit that you can use to help you through. So again, it's about planning. It's about incident response. So it sets it. There is a bit of an analogy around the bereavement curve when you've had a data breach, and that's something that Troy's written about and spoken about. Don't blame the other guy. You probably failed, which allowed the attacker to succeed. That's more often than not the scenario that we find. Seek support. So again, if you've got a cert in your country, in the UK we have the NCSC, a very capable bunch of people. They've moved on leaps and bounds in what they're available to do and what their capabilities are in recent times. Go out to the authorities. So the ICO, okay? You need to notify these guys anyway. You've got a 72-hour window from discovering a breach to notifying the authority. And if you are a telecommunications company or you process data in that kind of way, you've got 24 hours. That's not a long time to get your information in order and go out to your data protection authority. But when you do notify your ICO or equivalent, they can actually parachute in some really clever people to help you out, to help you through it, to help you with the PR, the incident management, and getting the right messages out to the public. Don't be a talk, okay? So what happened? Figure it all out. Do your analysis, do your forensics, speak to people. Don't blame people. Yeah, just engage the right people and understand what the problem was. Because if you understand, you've learned a lesson, and you can introduce the right controls, the right technology, the right processes, the right awareness to people that would prevent or limit the risk of it happening again. And take it on the chin, because it's happened, and move on. And you'll feel better, and your customers and your users will feel better as well. So we've got 9 minutes left, and I'm going to just quickly blast through. So Norse Hydro, they were a great example of an organisation that really messed up, but they did everything really reasonable in their power to keep messages going out to shareholders, to customers, to people that cared. They opened side channels on Azure websites. It was a really, in the scheme of things, it was a pretty cool response. They did a good job. Okay, who knows what one of these is?
Hey, that's mine.
My next question was, hands up who's got one.
So there's a backstory to that.
Well, talking of backstories, we hear that the cock cam has a particularly good resolution, and you took a few pictures that you didn't share. So, but yeah, I mean, cock cam. Going back to this,
it was for research purposes,
of course. Yeah, they had a problem, and again, Twitter reacted. Ken Monroe got involved, but they handled it really well. In fact, they delisted as a company very quickly, and then came back online quickly. So we'll actually use those guys. I'm going to have to do this again. So sorry. Okay. All right. So Ian talked very briefly about Sandbox Escaper earlier on. So we won't revisit that example. But what we need to do is make it clear that you don't just drop 0 days on the web because you're pissed at the world. There are different ways you can go about getting your issues dealt with and vented. And that's what this community tends to be all about. And in doing that, if you do choose to drop the 0 days, then you are opening yourself up to a lot of criticism and the potential for law enforcement to be on your case, and in Trick's case, vaporised by a predator. Yeah, that's kind of extreme. But don't make false claims. So if you think your product's unhackable, just think it. Never say it.
Shut up.
Because I guarantee you that within days, if you're lucky, somebody like Ken Monroe or the guys at PTP or Andy Tierney.
He also works at PTP.
Who also works at PTP.
There are other firms other than PTP. Thank you for your sponsorship, PTP.
Thanks for providing us an unlimited supply of material for our talks.
And just to be clear, the Beer Farmers site is not unhackable. It is definitely unhackable.
Think very long and hard before considering doxing people whose privacy and anonymity they'd rather have preserved. I'll leave that hanging.
I heard that.
Yeah. Show a bit of respect at the end of the day. We're all here. I like to think the majority of us are here because we care. So when people are having a bad day or saying things that are at odds with your opinion, then just cut them a bit of slack. And I'm guilty of this as well. So, you just need to be a little bit more mindful of people. And
except if you punch a cat, then I'm okay with everybody doxing you for that.
Yeah.
When they recorded it on video and then they arrested the little douchebag. It was awesome.
Not punching the cat, that wasn't awesome.
No, he said it was a bad thing.
Arresting the douchebag.
Yeah.
I was at a training course recently where a colleague of mine came out with something he'd heard, which was for every individual that you meet, they're having a personal battle or more that you know nothing about. And I thought that was really an important point. It was the most valuable thing I took from the training course because it's right. Don't judge people and don't assume everyone's having a good day. All right? So we've been the Beer Farmers. See you at the bar. But wait. Hang on. We did an encore at Leeds because all of us were there, the original 5 of us. So, does anybody recognise this?
The Golden Cowbell.
No, 1 or 2 people. Yeah. Brian recognised it. So we were busy at the back end of last year looking at all the shit that had been happening on the internet, the people that were talking shit on the internet, some of the events on the internet, and we came up with the Retro Awards. And a couple of the people that received those awards are here with us today, and we're going to hand out those awards. So we'll quickly flick through, because we only got 5 minutes, and there are only 2 of them here, but Simon Smith, the Australian cybersecurity, he invented cybersecurity in Australia.
He's bigger than Troy Hunt.
He's bigger than Troy Hunt. He's quiet. He's much more quiet than Troy Hunt. And Scott, you won the most cultivated hairdo award.
And car.
And
so, you find I've got a better car, though. That's,
we've got a golden hairspray. That cost me £4.50 in Boots in Manchester. And Andy likes to talk about his car. What colour is your car?
Bright fucking blue.
Bright fucking blue. But Scott would argue he's got a better car than you. And in keeping with that, and in keeping with gold, hey, mate.
Yes.
Some
giant bollocks.
Golden fluffy dice. And I expect to see a picture of those on Twitter in your car, on your rear view mirror.
As soon as I get home.
Okay, so Cowbell end of the year. That's a standing award, I think, until foreseeable times. Pointless Tap was the Bitfire crypto wallet, still available to buy on Blackpool Pier. The hacker collective, mistakenly known as Cyber Gibbons, also sometimes somehow called Oversoft. Right, I did read that out, you probably could tell. But it was a bunch of people, Andy Tierney, Oversoft, Tautology, a bunch
Tautology's in the room, he's right there.
Nice docs.
So some really clever people who took Bitfire to task and demonstrated that you could play Doom on it. I think that was the coolest thing I saw. They had Doom up and running on it. The InfoSec Rockstar, who sells a book called InfoSec Rockstar, but ran his e-commerce site over HTTP.
PCI.
But he's fixed it. Even redirects now, right? I'm not sure. Anyway. Fingers in their ears, Davey Weiner. We've avoided the term anti-vaxxer until I just said it there.
Who's that?
I don't know, some bloke. But he's got very strong opposite opinions around the encrypted web and the value of doing that. Cambridge Analytica. Bear in mind this was January, so they were still in the news at the back end of the year. Zuckerberg, Marriott, because they really did lose a lot of data.
My data.
And finally, the Golden Cowbell Award, which was, in our opinion, worth issuing to Troy, because in our opinion, not just because he's here, because we did say it in January, long before we got him to come and join us, that we think he does individually a lot, more than many, in terms of furthering the cause of information security, both for individuals and for businesses. So, for that, Troy, step up, open this box, and show everybody what we've bought for you.
Watch out, front row.
It's splash zone.
You need to unwrap it, and you need to brew stickings in it.
Every time I die, Richard.
Fantastic.
Okay, ring it again.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you very much.